Welcome back to Trading Hour. Well, let's now directly cut across to Shereen Bhan in conversation with the top brass at HCLTech and Infosys at the Nasscom Technology and Leadership Forum 2025.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure to be back here at the annual Nasscom Leadership Forum. I can't remember the last number of the forums that I've done, but it's certainly more than 15. So it's great to be back here in the presence of two gentlemen that I've always had the pleasure of speaking with and enjoy having these conversations with them. CVK, Salil, many, many thanks for joining us. You know, as I was telling somebody this morning, it's an unusual time to be a journalist in because we don't have to go chasing headlines. The headlines are actually chasing us. And there's been plenty that's changed just at the start of 2025. 2022 was the breakout moment as far as ChatGPT was concerned. And in January, you had Stargate, $500 billion over the next 4 years in terms of AI infrastructure. That was the big announcement that came in from Donald Trump. Then you had the big DeepSeek explosion and what it means as far as the AI race and the AI wars are concerned. Now we're talking about quantum computing in the context of what breakthrough Microsoft has just been able to achieve with Majorana 1. And all of this is the mix that these two gentlemen have to navigate as we talk about the road ahead for Indian IT services. So let me get started with just that. We're living in an era of uncertainty. We're living in an era of revolutionary technology changes. It's not evolutionary anymore. It's revolutionary technology changes, AI, quantum computing, and so on and so forth. CVK, let me start by talking to you. When I spoke with both of you in January this year in Davos, the mood was one of confidence and optimism. I think both of you said that on a time of demand explosion as far as the Indian IT services sector is concerned. Would you continue to that conversation forward to start with? Demand explosion. More importantly, the questions that are being asked today on the mix for Indian IT services, whether this business model will continue to be relevant, yes or no?
Shereen, as I mentioned in Davos, I strongly believe that the business model is ripe for disruption. What we saw in the last 30 years, a fairly linear scaling of IT services, which scaled with people and revenue scaled very linearly. I think the time is already out for that model. And today, in fact, just not today, in the last couple of years, we've been challenging our teams on how you can deliver twice the revenue with half the people, right? That's really the kind of call that I've made to a lot of my teams. And I think it's definitely a big moment of disruption. I mean, all of us are seeing good demand. All of that is happening. That's really a linear extrapolation of the current business model with different economic situations. Your demand may go up and down. But what is fundamentally changing is something which we need to recognize and react to that.
Well, that's a very important statement, and I don't know how many of you caught that. You said the time is out for this business model. What are we talking about then in terms of disruption? What are we also talking about then in terms of adaptability and innovation? Where does the industry find itself if you believe that time is in fact out for this business model?
Yeah. Should I continue?
Yes, please, okay. And then I'll get to Salil.
Okay. So I think a large part of the industry is really driven by a very input-based model. It's either time and material, or it's always a number of people delivering certain outcomes. But I think we need to dramatically change from input-based to more output and outcome-based. A lot of services that we deliver, operational services, from people-based, it needs to become platform-based. So we've always heard of software as a service, but service as a software is definitely taking place quite dramatically. And I mean, we all need to be more proactive in adopting. We should not be complacent about whatever growth that we are seeing in the business should not make us complacent. Because the underlying themes are not the same as cloud and digitization and other things. This is very different. The changes that AI is ushering in is very different, and we need to be more proactive to even cannibalize our revenues to create completely new businesses. Having said that, I remain quite optimistic of how we can reinvent. As long as you recognize the change is not the same as what we've seen maybe 2 decades, 3 decades ago, I think we are setting ourselves on a good fundamental basis to reinvent our industry.
I'll talk about reinvention in just a second, but let me get Salil in on the conversation. Salil, before we came in, you said, what's the problem? There is no problem that we're faced with at this point in time. If I look at what CVK is saying, he's clearly not suggesting that, that we don't have a problem to deal with.
In fact, I fully agree with what CVK is saying. I think the view that we see is there's a huge shift in technology. Whether you look at generative AI or you look at quantum, or there are several other technologies in motion today which will impact where the world goes. What I mean by a view of the future that we are seeing is when there's huge technology change, we within Infosys, I think we broadly within the Indian IT sector are ready to face that challenge. And it's actually exciting because you look at some of the new work that's going on, whether it's from startups through large businesses, it's all coming from India. Where we see a big impact, for example...
But your revenues are not coming from India. Your revenues are not coming from India.
The what?
Your revenue is not coming from India.
No, what I mean is look at the innovation that we are driving. If you look at in quantum, we have work that we are doing, for example, in drug discovery, using early quantum platforms. There are 2 large companies, both cloud-based and non-cloud-based, that have a good quantum platform. And we can already see examples of that. You look at like a telco network optimization. We are seeing examples of that. Now, this is all being done because we have massive scale across India, across Infosys, whichever lens you put on it, and that helps to drive it. I very much agree that we have to be ready and not be complacent, that we have change coming upon us.
But do you believe, with what CVK just said, that the time is up on the current business model?
No, what I feel is, what CVK is saying is really a call for us to make sure we don't remain complacent. There are aspects of what we are doing today that are growing well. That will continue, but we need to find new ways. So if you look at AI, there's a massive productivity benefit we are seeing. For example, in software development, between 7% and 15%. That's a huge number. And we use that in our Finacle product as an example. But we're also seeing new work. There are new work in credit analysis we're doing with a client, which we would never have done had it not been for generative AI. So there's a balance of it. There's new work, which expands the market, and there's productivity, which gives us efficiency. So both of those have to be taken into account. That's how I understood where CVK is saying, make sure we're not complacent about it.
You know, let's talk about the reinvention that you mentioned, CVK, and for the benefit of everybody sitting here, let's start by talking about what you've already started to work on, the measures, the steps that you've already taken as part of this reinvention, and this arc, this transition that you talked about from, you know, software as a service to service as a software. How ready are you today, and what will you need to do to make that transition?
See, I think the first and foremost change that we're driving within our organization is the mindset change. We're all very used to a certain mindset of delivering certain value to clients, but that paradigm is changing, right? You could deliver the same value maybe with half the people, then you really have to force yourself to think, whatever human potential that is unlocked, how can you use that to create more growth opportunities? Really, that is the mindset shift that we need to make. Obviously, all of us have growing businesses. We have people with a lot of aspiration. So how do you really take care of people's aspiration while being very proactive about adopting these technologies and bringing highest level of productivity? The productivity that is unlocked, how can that be used to create more value and more growth?
So how are you creating more value?
Yes. I mean, number of examples, like for a very large financial services firm, where we were delivering a transformation program. Client is spending maybe $1 billion a year. It's a 5-year program. We believe it can be done in 3.5 years. And there is enough proof points that this can be done. But here, the value is not in the 18 months that we will save, which of course is going to be significantly cost effective for the client, but it's the time to value. Whatever the policy modernization they wanted to roll out, what is the time to value? I think that's where the biggest value creation is possible.
You know, speaking of value creation, Salil, let me ask you this now. You know, we're talking about human genius and human ingenuity as well, and we were just talking about moving from people to platform. Now, what actually happens on the workforce? Because this is a sector that has been driving, employment for a young country, for a young demographic like India. What happens to the people part of this business now? Let's talk about that. What happens to entry-level jobs, for instance? What are we talking about in the next 5 years?
So first, in the existing employees that we have, there's huge reskilling. So there's a constant move, especially with generative AI, but all through when we were having digital or cloud or cyber, a lot of reskilling today, at least within Infosys, over 270,000 people more ready for AI. So that's the first element. Second, in terms of new roles, we've already shared this last quarter. For the next financial year, starting April, we will recruit something like 15 to 20,000 new campus hires, which shows the same sort of direction of what we were discussing earlier, which is there is growth, there is productivity, and there is new work from these technologies. All of that combined gives us confidence to have new people joining from the campus.
You know, speaking of taking risks and taking bets, and I want both of you to comment on this. As I started by saying, we're talking about big numbers here, you know, $500 billion over the next 4 years and so on and so forth. You're trapped, so to speak, in the tyranny of the quarter-to-quarter existence. When you talk about big bets, if I understand from your comments, you're not talking about incremental changes. You're talking about big, bold decisions. Do you have the capacity to bet on them with the kind of bold investments that are required as well? Will the markets allow you to do that?
Yeah, it's a very difficult choice. And if you look at, I can just talk about HCLTech. We have taken bold bets. 6-7 years ago, we invested $4 billion in building a software business. Right. So I think as long as you can take bold bets and walk the journey, make them work, mitigate your risks in the right way, I think we can navigate it. I'm pretty sure. Of course, the investors and the market should also not be looking at this business as to how many freshers are you going to hire. That's absolutely the wrong question to ask. How can you create more value out of, maybe we have 200,000 people, can you create twice the value with the same number of people? It's the same thing, right? So you really get more out of the existing teams. And if you challenge yourself in that direction, then I think the business will unlock a completely new growth trajectory. So I'm really betting on the fact that unlock more human potential in very different ways. Like today, India is the services capital of the world. Why can't India become the research capital of the world? I think those are the levers which will change the people and the employment and the training, all those dynamics. So I think it needs a different thinking, and we should all be open for that.
Different thinking, but also significant spends, Salil, and the ability and the capacity and the appetite to make the kind of spends that are necessary?
So I think we are fortunate, as CVK mentioned, that there are ability for us to take within Infosys, or even in the IT sector as a whole, bets of that nature. So take an example where we did something of building a product like Finacle a few years ago. We built and invested in an insurance product called McCamish. We're working on a retail online product, e-commerce product, Equinox. So there's many examples of these big bets. Within the construct of what we are able to drive into the market, what we are able to commit to the market, and making sure that that's what our clients are looking for. So you look at in generative AI, now we built 4 small language models. These small, so one of them is for banking, one of them is for IT operations. This is a material change in the way clients will work with generative AI. And yes, we've done that with an investment that we made, which is not publicly disclosed, but it's a large investment within the constructs of our P&L. Sorry?
Ballpark, when you say
ballpark,
large investment?
Ballpark like a large ball. It's still ballpark. But it's still an investment which is within the construct of our P&L. But it's creating huge impact. So you look at the large language model that we built for banking, a small language model, there's already a lot of discussion that clients are using with their existing large language models to combine it and use it. So there's benefits that we can create within our construct.
You know, you talked about small language models, so let's get into the debate of whether we should attempt the large language models or not. And Salil, let me start by asking you, should India make that choice of going the large language model way, or should we build on our strengths, which is on the application side?
So here, I'll leave it to CVK to answer this.
Wait, no. You can't get away with that. You've got to say something at least.
I think without a doubt, the cost of what we are doing in terms of building models is falling. So when the time is right, we should make sure we make the right investments, build the right small language model.
Okay, you said nothing through that. Yes or no?
I think from an India perspective, we absolutely have to make sure that we are the leading light of generative AI. So doing that, there's no other way, but as the costs keep falling, and we saw that with what we saw with the investments that were, well, not exactly the number, but certainly a very low number, closer to 5 million than hundreds of millions. But that is what will give us a benefit, and we need to make those sort of investments to create the foundation model.
Okay, CVK, straight answer. Yes to large language models, no to large language models.
I mean, from a country perspective, I would strongly argue that we will need to build our own models. And the rationale is, I mean, if you look at so many open source models available, why not we kind of pick some of them and build on top of it? But we should not assume that these open source models will continue to be open source. I think these are going to be the coins on which the geopolitics is going to be played on, right? There could be like DeepSeek is available, but tomorrow it may not be available. Similarly, OpenAI and all other Llama, all of that. There could be countries which could really kind of limit some of them being used beyond their own boundaries. So I think to have a long-term competitive advantage, it makes a lot of sense to build, and the costs are coming down. We need to find ways to very economically create the training infrastructure to train the models. And I think that's my view.
You know, since you spoke about geopolitics, and let me get both of you to comment on what's happening in the US today, which is, of course, the largest market for not just the two of you, but also for the IT services sector. And Salil, let me start by asking you, you know, we wake up every morning to what President Trump has tweeted or what Elon Musk is saying on Twitter and so on and so forth, and that kind of dictates the news cycle. Is it dictating the business cycle as well? Has it started to dictate the business cycle?
So what we are seeing so far, and just week before last, I was in the US meeting with several clients. There's a view that what is being discussed by what the government is doing is benefiting the US businesses, maybe through less regulation, maybe through policies that will help the economy. So our view, if that is what plays out, is as the economy in the US or Western Europe markets becomes more stronger, which is already in the US in good shape, we will see more business for tech. And there are two types of things. We've talked a little bit about this in the past. We see a lot of discussions which are tech and ops on efficiency, and that's going extremely well right now. Then there's a lot of work on tech, which is to build for growth. Let's say cloud, AI, other things. And as the economy numbers start to become better, we will see more of that. And so that gives us the second leg of growth. So we have that one leg, which is giving us decent growth right now. With the second leg of growth, if that comes, when that comes, we will see more and more growth.
But, you know, again, and I link this back to what we were talking about, the need to adapt as well as the change as far as the business model is concerned. In a Trump era, with the H-1B issue being the way that it is being dealt with at this point in time, what could it potentially mean as far as the services sector is concerned? What could it mean for Indian IT in the next few years?
So there, I think two parts to what you ask, and there I'll talk a little bit more about Infosys. We've built over the last few years a more resilient business, especially for the US. We've made sure we built out more and more local delivery and digital centers. We've got now more staff which are local. Over 60% of our teams in the US are local. We built quite a strong nearshore capability for the US. So we feel better prepared if there are any changes. So far, we've not seen any changes.
CVK?
Yeah, I think on both the topics, I would agree with Salil. I think the business environment is becoming more vibrant. In the last 2 or 3 quarters, we are seeing increasing demand. In spite of all the different conversations that are happening due to executive orders and things like that. And on H1B, I think for the industry, it's a much smaller issue than what it was 2 decades ago. All of us have built a lot more local capabilities, and we're very less dependent on H1B.
Since we're talking about capabilities, and I want to get both of you to talk about this because there have been acquisitions that both HCLTech and Infosys have done. Do you believe that that will have to continue to be the route to look at, especially as we enter this turbocharged AI quantum era? Salil, let's start by talking to you. Capability building inorganically, is that going to have to be the route to take for Indian IT?
So I'm not sure it has to be, but it's definitely a huge attention for us with Infosys, and I'm sure for others as well. We see, I mean, our balance sheet is strong, cash flow is strong, so we have huge opportunity to buy larger and larger things. We did something on engineering services a couple of quarters ago. Our pipeline for acquisition is pretty broad. It's across different industries, it's across different capabilities, it's across also geographies, because there's new geographies coming up which are good. So we feel pretty good. As always, there's no way to say it'll happen now or in 6 months. But if you look at, let's say, next 3 years.
But larger? Will they typically be larger?
Yeah, it'll definitely be. If you look at the one we did, engineering services, the largest acquisition that we've done. So if you look at the trend over the last 4 years, each of those, the largest one was the last one we've done. We see more and more larger ones. Which one will happen when is not clear, but there's appetite for it.
CVK?
Yeah, I don't know about larger, but we see a need to look at capability-led acquisitions, creating more partnerships with startups, with our ecosystem providers, and that's how we see that as adding to the overall capability of the company.
Okay, so let's talk about the next steps now as we talk about this journey that we are talking about in this big transition, and it's not the stronger, as they say, or the biggest that will survive, but the most adaptable. What have you been able to do? What are you focusing on? What are you prioritizing to make sure that you're adaptable and more agile to deal with the circumstances that we're coping with, Salil?
So there, I think it's absolutely the fundamental of how we need to stay relevant. One of the things we've done is make sure we remain relevant to what clients are looking for. And that, if you look back over the last few years, at one stage we were 20% digital, now we are over 60% digital. It'll be a similar story if you take, let's say, cloud, a similar sort of growth or change, let's say AI. Today, AI is still a small part of our revenue, but it's a large part because it's part of every discussion. And as we grow, it's going to become more and more relevant.
So what could it potentially be over the next 5 years?
I don't have a number for what it will be, but what is clear is what we need to remain relevant for what clients are talking about. Today, clients over the last couple of years are more focused on cost and efficiency. And now we see with the changes, as you mentioned earlier, on the US economy, more and more interest in doing larger spends on tech programs. So we need to remain vigilant and relevant.
So back to more transformational stuff?
As the economy improves, my sense is there'll be more transformation coming into play.
CVK?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Salil. I think instead of chasing growth, we should really be chasing client relevance, which will, in some form or other, really help you grow. I think if you're constantly asking the question and really challenging the teams, how are you being relevant to every client? I think that's really the foundation of growth.
Okay, so when we talk about relevance, and we're pretty much coming to the end of our time, so I'm going to get 1 or 2 questions from the audience as well. But CVK, let me start by asking you said the wrong question to ask is how many freshers are you hiring at this point in time? What's the right question to ask?
Right question to ask is, what is your revenue per employee? Or what is your profit per employee?
What is your revenue per employee and profit per employee?
This is all published numbers. We are probably...
I know. So for those who haven't tracked the quarter...
It's $57,000 per person. So.
So, Salil, what is the right question to ask for a business that is adapting to the new trends that we're faced with?
I think what CVK mentioned earlier, the relevance, where are we remaining relevant to clients? The way to look at this, at least from my perspective, and I'm a huge optimist with this industry, with this sector, with what we are doing at Infosys, the world is driving change through technology. We are in India, we are in a smaller way, let's say in Infosys, really at the forefront, at the center of technology. And as long as we remain relevant, technologies will change. You may not recall many years ago, there were things like RPA and object-oriented programming. All of those were very relevant for those times. And today there's a new set, which will also make huge fundamental changes. But as long as we remain relevant to what our clients are doing, that will make us more and more conducive to growth and profits.
So the skepticism or the questions that are being asked around the fact that is this an existential moment again for the Indian IT services industry as it was perhaps a decade ago, you don't believe that's the case?
No, for me, in fact, it's a moment of even more optimism because there's such great technology change. And once you have technology change, in my mind, we have shown in the past as Infosys, as the IT industry, we adapt really well. And the way we've adapted,
is this high optimism going to lead to now mid-high single-digit or double-digit growth? Salil, I mean, are we likely to get closer to the historical growth rates that we've seen for the industry?
It's always nice to see how we transition from Nasscom to CNBC-TV18. So we will get the answer at that stage.
Okay, we'll tie you down to that. But CVK, do you believe that we're likely to go back to the historical growth rates that we've seen? Since both of you are so confident and optimistic about demand.
I strongly believe that the industry has enough opportunities. If you're really going to chase the volumes, I think you can make a big impact. There is always going to be some deflation in existing business due to all the things that we talked about, but we really have to go after volume growth. We have to go after value growth. I think that's what is going to drive the growth.
Again, and I want both of you to labor on this for just a minute more. You said that this time it's different. And while we hear that every time that there is a technology shift, that this time it's different, but what I am hearing from both of you, as well as from other people that we've been speaking to, as the pace of change is perhaps much faster than previously, and that's one of the big significant changes. What makes this time so different, CVK?
I mean, as you said, it is the pace of change. And every time when there's been change, the IT services industry normally demonstrates a lot of confidence that you will be able to retrain and reinvent yourself. And that confidence could really be the challenge this time, right? You need to be more paranoid about the level of impact it can have. And if you really approach it as an existential
threat. Are you more paranoid today than you were 10 years ago?
Absolutely. And I think if you approach it with that paranoia and an existential threat, I think we will all come out winners in the long run.
Are you more paranoid today than you were 10 years ago?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think we have to be paranoid. We have to be not complacent. That is the way we can manage to keep up with what's going on in the industry. I think to your question, what's different? The scale of investment is different. I mean, we've not seen this level. You read numbers like 500 billion that you mentioned. If you look at capital expenditures by some large companies, 80 billion, 200 billion, these are huge numbers. And so that drives massive technological change growth. Hopefully, it's what is going to show up sooner rather than later. And so we need to be more prepared, but really massively paranoid.
So the question then on return on investments, when do you believe that we're going to be at that point where the kind of investments that are being made, we will see the proof as far as returns are concerned?
So those I have no idea in terms of when that'll happen.
For you and for the industry.
For us, I think we are seeing, I mean, if you look at the changes that we are seeing in the type of work that we were talking a little bit earlier about, examples that you heard from CVK and myself, these are examples of projects that are ongoing today. So their change is already imminent and upon us, and it's coming because of the investments, which is probably at our scale at Infosys we've made, in the training, in the innovation, in the technology. But that is being driven by the global sort of investments that are coming through in the changes coming through.
Okay, I'm going to take one question here. Yes, there's a gentleman there. I don't know if we can get a microphone across to you, sir. If you can come up front, maybe that'll be easier. Yeah, I think there should be a mic coming to you. Let me, this will be faster.
Yes, thank you very much. My name's Anthony Hayward. I run a startup called Hard Skills, and we're a future of work startup, and we focus on soft skills. And in fact, we worked for HCL for many years. And Mr. Vijayakumar, particularly, I wanted to pick up on your point about getting twice the output from the same team. And both of you have talked about skills and mindsets, and arguably, the key skills for everything that's been covered this morning are the soft skills, the ability to think critically, communicate and collaborate. And many business leaders talk about this, but I wondered what your view was on that.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I mean, soft skills are of paramount importance. Even generative AI, more than anything else, it's a prompt engineering which is so relevant. And prompt engineering is really a communication skill. It's a soft skill, right? And I think it's very evident that soft skills will go hand in hand in this reinvention.
Salil?
No, absolutely. I think soft skills are very critical. We have a program within Infosys to ensure that many of our employees are trained on this. We have partnered with colleges, both in India and outside India, to have specifically those sort of skills. We also have soft skills which are non-engineering, which are more like digital design type of skills, in addition to soft skills which are on communications, or soft skills which are on cultural interaction and so on. So huge relevance from what we see.